Hey guys, Esther here, and I'm back for another video with Lowland Kids. In this video, I'm going to walk you through sewing up the reversible swim bottoms. These are a surprisingly easy sew, so don't be put off by needing to use swim fabric like lycra or what else is swim fabric? Like a poly stretch. So don't be put off by that. And I'm just going to use a regular sewing machine with the zigzag stitch. So you don't need any fancy machines or anything like that to get started. I'll do my best to talk you through step by step as we go. There is also a reversible swim top, so I'll talk you through that in another video soon. That's going to be my next sewing project, so keep an eye out for that. Otherwise, I have also sewn up a rashi with Lowland, so that video should be up as well. Let's get started.
As you can see here, there's a high-waisted option and the bikini option. There is also the option for with diapers and without diapers, which is great because diapers obviously need a little bit more room. Here are my two pieces cut out. I'll be using elastic and I'm going to add a little frill around the waist. I will add a disclaimer that because I added this frill, it kind of stuck up. So to overcome that, I folded down my waistband as you can see in these pictures so you can see the contrast fabric. So if you don't want that, then I wouldn't recommend adding a frill. Using elastic is optional, but I really like that it creates a very stable finish and makes all of the edges really neat. To calculate how much elastic you need, you just need to measure the leg opening or the waist and then calculate 90% of that. So for example, if the opening is 10 centimeters, you need elastic that is 9 centimeters. This is so that when we sew the seam, you can stretch the elastic ever so slightly to fit that seam, and then the elastic will hold everything in place without bunching it up too much or making it too tight. And if you have chosen to use elastic, we're still following the same set of instructions. It's just that for each seam that you want elastic, you're going to lay that elastic on top and sew that as well as your fabric. Okay, so let's start. The first seam that we're going to sew is the leg opening. We're going to have our fabric right sides together, use a stretch needle and a zigzag stitch to sew your leg openings together. Once sewn, you can flip them the right way out, and the sides of your fabric that you want to be showing as the reversible bottoms should now be on the outside. Now we can sew our side seams together, making sure that our right sides are together, so the right sides of the fabric. So here you can see I'm matching my print with my print, and they'll be facing each other so that when I open it up, the print's obviously on the outside. Then I'm also matching up the check side, which is harder to tell which is the right side, but I've got it the right sides together again, and I'm basically going to sew straight down that line. Make sure you're using a stretch stitch again, so either your serger or a zigzag stitch. Do the same for the other side seam, and then it should be looking like this. You'll notice that I've got clips around my leg openings because I'm going to top stitch that down. I found that it's way too difficult to try and get each fabric to sit perfectly on either side without being able to see the other fabric, if that makes sense. So what I've done is I've actually intentionally shown a little bit of the other fabric as a contrast, so it kind of looks like I've got a contrast rib going around the outside. If you have a cover stitch machine, you can use that, otherwise I'm just using my zigzag stitch again. I was really pleased with how the top stitching turned out. I think it looks really nice and neat and it holds everything in place really well. So now the last thing to do is finish off the waistband. I forgot to mention that the instructions that come with the pattern mentioned that we should cut a little notch at the center back of each of your fabrics so that it's really easy to tell which the back is later on. Now is that moment, so make sure that you've got the backs of both of your fabrics because now we want to put the right sides of those backs together. The swimmers will end up looking kind of like a burrito. It's called the burrito method, where most of the fabric gets sort of tucked on the inside and it looks very wrong, but as long as you've got those notches that are in the center of your back pieces and you've got the right sides together, then you're on the right track. I'm going to use 3 clips to mark the center back because we need to leave about an inch of an opening so that we can flip the swimmers the right way out. So you don't want to sew over at least about an inch. Because I'm adding this additional little frill to my swimmers, this is the part where I'm going to work on them, so you can skip ahead a little bit if you're not doing that. So first I'm going to gather my frill I'm going to sew along the short edge using a really long stitch length. So for me, the maximum is 5. And then I'm going to make sure that I leave a bit of thread at the start and at the end of the frill. And I'll sew 2 rows so that it looks like this. Then I'll take 1 thread from each line of stitching and pull it so that it gathers the fabric up into a little frill. You can also gather it on a serger if you know how to do that. Make sure you check which side of the frill you want to be showing on which side of your swimmers, because I actually sewed mine the wrong way and I had to unpick it all and do it again. You should place the wrong side of the frill against the right side of the fabric. So for example, for my printed side of swimmers, I had to place the grey side of the frill against the printed side so that when I turned my frill out, the printed side of the frill was with the printed side of the fabric. To place my frill, I measured 2.5 inches from the side seam in both directions and put my frill at that marking. I clipped the start and the end of the frill, and then I sort of moved the gathers around so that they were distributed nice and evenly. Now I can start sewing here, keeping in mind to leave that part where we've got the clips so that we can turn it out the right way later. And if you're doing a frill, it should be sandwiched in between the other 2 pieces of fabric like this. Remember to use a stretch stitch such as zigzag or a serger. I still wanted to use elastic for the waistband, but I thought that it would be easier to sew it together first, and then when I was happy with it, I would go over that same stitch using the zigzag with the elastic. If you are using elastic, make sure that you still leave that little gap at the center back. Now you can use that small opening to turn your bathers out the right way. It might take a little bit of pulling and pushing, but just take your time and be careful, and eventually they'll all turn out the right way like this. The last thing to do is to close that opening at the center back. Just fold the fabric in and use some clips or some pins to hold it shut. I highly recommend top stitching the entire waistband because you'll just get a really beautiful finish if you do it that way. If you'd prefer not to do top stitching though, you can do a ladder stitch. So just Google how to do a ladder stitch so that you can't actually see any thread on the outside of your swimmers. Otherwise, if you're not fussed or you're using a busy print where you won't be able to see it anyway, you can just use a straight stitch and sew it closed. Give them a nice press and then the swimmers are all done.
So there we go. I hope that this video was helpful for you. As you would have seen, I made a few little alterations like using elastic for most of the seams, and I also added that little frill. So let me know what you thought in the comments below, and if you had any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below as well, and we'll do our best to get back to you. There's also a great sewing community on Facebook. It's a Facebook group called Lowland Kids Sewing Thread, so look that up. There's lots of inspiration on there for what you should make next. And I've also done a whole bunch of videos with Lowland now, so you can jump over onto the YouTube channel and find lots of inspiration and lots of tutorials where I will talk you through how to sew up so many different items. I'll see you in another video soon.